Welcome to Module 5. In this module, we're going to go through our actions, we're going to go through our needs, and then we're going to dive into our reprogramming tools. I'm going to give you a bunch of really deep reprogramming tools now that you know how this process works from the belief, thought, and emotional level. So, first and foremost, I want you to know going into this that we have 6 basic human needs. This is something Tony Robbins talks about a lot. So we've got significance is a basic human need. These are things that we're sort of naturally wired for. Love and connection, certainty, uncertainty, growth, and contribution. So I'm going to do something different with our 6 basic human needs. I'm going to show you how we are basically living our lives as a subconscious strategy to get back into these needs according to where we have the highest need based on wherever we've perceived the highest void for a period over time. That sounds complicated, but I'm going to break this down and make it really simple for you in a moment. Now, wherever you're at in your life, there's a lot of people who come to me and say things like, my needs are so unmet and my life has been so difficult and so challenging. And I want you to know that if you're here doing this course right now, you can think of your life as like, if you're going to bake a cake, you're not necessarily going to have the flour and look at the flour and be like, oh my gosh, this is the most delicious thing ever. Or look at the eggs and be like, oh, this is so amazing. I can't wait to eat these eggs raw, or the butter raw. Sometimes healing and transformation require putting many ingredients together and putting them together somewhere over time and creating a certain output. So just like you wouldn't judge a cake by the flour or just the eggs or just the butter, wherever you're at in your life right now, however much your needs are met or unmet, you don't want to judge your life by just a single ingredient, just a tiny snapshot in time. For all you know, you might be at a space right now where you're just on the bridge or just on the cusp of major transformation and amazing things happening. And if you're here doing this course for the content we're going to get into and the reprogramming that's about to happen, you are definitely just on the cusp of that transformation. So, number one, as you go through this, I want you just to take a moment and from those 6 basic human needs that you have in your workbook, I just want you to label what is most important to you to least important to you. And I want you to know something else that's really important for this module. The brain has something called a homeostatic impulse. It's basically always seeking equilibrium. So wherever we perceive something to be missing for a prolonged period of time, or if there's a really strong single imprint over time, okay, where there's repetition and emotion, or just a really strong imprint of emotion, your brain seeks to fulfill that thing. So wherever there's a void of something, your brain basically gives that thing extra value. It's like, okay, I really need to make this thing up here. And so that program itself can exist for a very long period of time. So that can look like having, let's say, lots of love and connection in childhood, and then that love and connection being taken away for some reason. And then there's this feeling of void, so you can put a lot of emphasis on your need for love and connection. Or this could look like something like having a lot of emotional neglect in childhood and feeling unseen and unheard and unimportant. And as a result of that, placing a lot of emphasis subconsciously on the need or your interest in feeling significant, having a really high need for significance. So whatever your needs order and structure is, number one, as you're putting them in order and hierarchy for yourself, you want to be really honest with yourself and you don't want to judge any of it. If your highest need is significance and your lowest is love and connection, it really doesn't matter. What matters is that you're honest with yourself. You can understand that these are just programs that exist in your subconscious mind and that we can do something with any of them. So I have an entire course on needs specifically, and it talks about our 6 basic human needs and how these manifest into our personality needs, which become sort of more daily needs that are a huge part of our personal subconscious blueprint and have a major impact on our life purpose and our personality and the relationships and interactions we have. And then we have our tertiary needs, which are like our moment-to-moment needs, connection, comfort, safety, these different needs that can just sort of pop up at sort of the spur of the moment according to what environment or circumstances we're interacting with. But for today, I'm just going to use our 6 basic human needs as a framework to dive into what we're going to get into next, which is the action piece. So remember, back to that equation, we talk about the BTEA, and we've touched on our beliefs now, have done some exercises around the belief reprogramming. We've touched on the thoughts and how to do some thought reprogramming in real time. We've talked a lot about emotions and the purpose of emotions and what we can do with them. And now we're going to talk about our actions for a moment. So I want you to know, going back to that piece, and you've heard me repeat this a few times now, all of our decisions are emotionally based decisions at their tipping point. So we know that a lot of the time that we're triggered, we're probably going to be using not the healthiest actions as coping mechanisms. A lot of times when we're in an emotionally charged state, we do things that are like yelling or withdrawing or stonewalling in our relationships, pushing people away, or we might, binge eat food or drink a lot of wine or do things that are like these escape mechanisms from our emotions, these sort of band-aid solutions that our subconscious mind has tried to come up with to best manage our emotions, and our conscious mind is sort of like offline, and we're going to learn how to actually understand what our personal coping mechanisms are at the action-based level, at the A of this BTEA equation. And then we're going to learn how to create new coping mechanisms so that we're not falling into this pattern of just doing these unconscious things that we're not happy with and that tend to be a little bit of self-sabotage in our life. So first and foremost, I want you to think of a time that you were triggered. And if you want, if this is helpful for you, you can think of many times that you're triggered and just notice what the patterns are for how you tend to respond to your triggers. And I'm going to go through some major sort of self-sabotage actions I see people taking part in, just from different people I've worked with and what tends to be really common. And you can see if yours are in here, but you can also ask yourself a few of your own individual coping mechanisms. It can be something totally different. And then we're going to dive into why this is happening and what to do about it and how to actually reprogram your actions themselves. Because remember, at any point along this equation, the beliefs, the thoughts, the emotions, the actions, we can break the cycle and create change and do it repetitively so that we create new programs at any place along this equation. So here's the ones that I see often. Sometimes I see people self-sabotaging and having self-sabotage actions through food. Sometimes I see people self-sabotaging through alcohol or substances. Sometimes I see people self-sabotaging their relationships by doing things like cheating or having even emotional affairs in their relationships. Sometimes I see people binge watching television or Netflix. Sometimes I see people getting a lot of anger and yelling, screaming. Sometimes I see people lying. And these are all very common self-sabotage patterns of behavior. Now, remember earlier what we were talking about. We were saying whenever you do something that you don't like, stop judging and just inquire. Judgment just gets you lost in another space. It just gets you caught in more negative internal dialogue and more negative emotion, and it stops you from having proper access to the root cause of why these things are happening in the first place. So no matter what your self-sabotage action is, for some people they're addicted to pornography, whatever it is, I want you to just write down as many as you can think of and maybe order them like in terms of what you do the most to what you do the least. Pick anything that you want to work on. And then I want you to know that every single thing that we do is essentially a subconscious strategy to preserve our needs. So the brain is sort of like a needs-meeting machine. It is always trying to get its needs met. And it will do this in a direct way or an indirect way. But a lot of times when our conscious mind is out of the picture, we picked up strategies to get our needs met in childhood that we've just kept as programs and built in as if these are the ways of getting our needs met, and we just keep them. And sometimes these can be really old or outdated strategies. I'll give you an example. Oftentimes I'll see couples who have been together for quite some time, and when they're feeling emotionally disconnected, they bicker a lot with each other. They'll start a fight or pick a fight. Why? Because when two people are emotionally disconnected and then somebody picks a fight, guess what happens? You're emotionally engaged when you're bickering or fighting, and you tend to be quite present with each other and with what's going on. So sometimes even things like picking a fight and bickering are actually just a subconscious strategy to get the need met for emotional connection. So remember when I was saying earlier, there's no such thing as self-sabotage. Everything's just a subconscious strategy to get specific needs met. This is true. But what happens over time is that our brain doesn't have more effective strategies to get the needs met. And because the brain is so survivalistic, it tends to go for the fastest way to get its needs met, not necessarily the best. So you can see how it might be the fastest way to get your needs met by picking a fight with your partner. So you get emotionally engaged and you feel some form of emotional connection, but that may not be the most effective way of getting your needs met. So the same process applies to all the different patterns of behavior at the action level of your BTEA equation that you don't like that you do. And they're also giving you feedback that your emotions are triggered, that you are probably running negative thoughts and belief patterns beneath the surface at the subconscious level. And again, you can go backwards and you can find what thoughts or belief patterns cause you to feel emotionally triggered and then cope through the self-sabotage pattern of behavior, or you can hack the equation at the action level itself. So here's what you do. Once you've identified and isolated the negative subconscious strategies that you use that tend to be self-destructive, but these are your coping mechanisms and what your brain knows, then we're going to look for what needs are actually being met through this thing. And what you'll see is that all of the things that you're doing that are destructive are actually just not the healthiest strategies to get your needs met, but your brain is really trying to work on your behalf. So I'll show you some common ones that I see that are actually meeting specific needs for people. So as I was mentioning, one of the first ones that I see to be so common is people binge eating food. Okay, so you're binge eating food, and what are our earliest associations to food? Well, first association to food that your subconscious is programmed with is actually when you're breastfeeding. So your mother's breast milk. What's happening at that time? You're getting a lot of comfort, a lot of safety, and a lot of emotional connection. Research shows that there's an enormous amount of oxytocin, which is the bonding neurochemical, that takes place in both the baby and the mother when a mother is breastfeeding. So a lot of times when people are eating food, it's actually because they have deeply unmet needs for comfort, for security, and for emotional connection. So when people are drinking alcohol excessively or using substances, oftentimes I'll hear people say things to me like, well, alcohol helps me to let down my walls, or sort of removes my inhibitions and allows me to open up and become more social, or allows me to connect with new people and not feel so afraid or sort of imprisoned. So drinking alcohol excessively, if you're going to a social event or you're around people, oftentimes that's just the brain's subconscious strategy to have more connection or to have more fun or to be more open-minded. And substances, a lot more so, I'll see as people trying to escape feelings that they're feeling. So it's this subconscious strategy to escape their mind. Something I want you to know as well is that when people are escaping, they're not escaping their world. They're escaping their perception of the world, like we were talking about earlier. So they're really trying to escape their mind. And this is taking place a lot of the time at the thought level. So I want you to imagine, because this is a really common thing amongst people, that throughout the day, when you're thinking those 60 to 70,000 thoughts per day, you have a lot of self-criticism. And let's say you've got a lot of negative thoughts, and let's say you're judging yourself and you're shaming yourself or guilting yourself a lot of the day. What's happening is all those thoughts are eliciting emotional responses, and then of course are creating these unconscious actions, and then they're impacting your physiology and they're making you not feel good. And a lot of times, if that's how we're showing up in the relationship to ourselves and our internal dialogue, that's what we're trying to escape, is the feelings that our own internal dialogue are creating. And imagine for a moment too that you could externalize the relationship to yourself. So let's imagine somebody was following you around all day, who was in charge of your emotions, in charge of how you felt, and all day long they were saying negative things to you and criticizing you and guilting you and shaming you and judging other people. You're probably going to want to escape that person. So a big part of healing that we won't go into in this course, but you can check out in the self-esteem course that we'll be doing, is about correcting your internal dialogue and about substituting negative self-critical thoughts with just kindness and gentleness and understanding towards yourself, inquiry instead of judgment and criticism towards self. So that's a lot of the time what I'll see people who are using substances are trying to do. They're just trying to escape their mind. Cheating, something I see with cheating all the time in relationships, or that people who are cheating, it's usually a subconscious strategy to feel significant or like they matter. A lot of people who cheat will come to me and say, oh, it's because my partner stopped seeing me. It's because my partner stopped hearing me and listening to me. They weren't present with me anymore. And I was hungering for those emotional needs to be met, to feel like I mattered to somebody. And when somebody gave me that attention, I felt alive again, right? So it can be things like attention, importance, and those things are what are sort of tracing back to the need for significance, one of our basic human needs. Television. A lot of the time I'll see, which is so interesting, I'll see people watch, especially like people watching reality TV shows or reading like fantasy novels or a lot of books or movies. They tend to be quite emotionally connected to the characters. And sometimes I'll see people who get their emotional needs for connection met through watching television and feeling connected to the characters in the shows. And a lot of the time, that's the easier solution for their brain because they might have a lot of limiting beliefs around people. So believing things like people don't like me and I can't make friends easily and people judge me too much, or having all these limitations on the belief side. So then their brain tries to get these needs met for social and emotional connection, and it feels unsafe to go there, so it goes into television, goes into fantasy novels, movies, books. And so the brain, again, is just this needs meeting machine, always trying to come up with a subconscious strategy to get your needs met. And again, passing through that reality filter of your belief programming. Anger. Anger is such an interesting one. I'll see people who are in years and years of anger management, and they're taught things like count to 10 or hold your breath or count backwards from 10 before you speak up or say anything. And these are all coping mechanisms. Anger is a symptom of unmet needs the vast majority of the time. And oftentimes I'll see people who are struggling with anger, not feeling in their lives like they are seen, heard, not feeling like they're empowered, not feeling that they can set boundaries. And so what does anger do? In one fell swoop, anger gets you seen and heard because you get big and loud. It makes you feel empowered, like you're taking your power back because you're strong and you stand up for yourself finally. And anger, it makes you set boundaries. So again, instead of judging these things and then trying to cope with them at a coping mechanism level, at a surface solution level, we want to start inquiring and notice, hey, maybe these things are here because my subconscious mind is trying to help me in some way. And I have to discover what those underlying needs are that are being met through these patterns of behavior that are self-sabotaging, so I can go meet these needs in a healthier, better, updated format. The last major coping mechanism that I'll see a lot is people lying. Well, when do people lie? People lie when they feel shame more often than not, or when they're trying to not hurt somebody else's feelings. So a lot of the time, the associations for needs being met that I'll see through lying is that people are trying to stay safe by avoiding shame or avoiding criticism, or people are trying to maintain emotional connection by avoiding hurting somebody's feelings. So I want you to write down what your major coping mechanisms are at the action level that are unhealthy. And it might be some of those things that we discussed, and it could be many other things, or endless. And then I want you to ask yourself, what needs is my subconscious mind getting met through these patterns of behavior? Because I guarantee there will always be something. And then in your next column, which you'll see in your workbook, I want you to ask yourself, what is a healthier, more effective strategy to get these needs met? Okay? And then what I want you to do once you've aligned yourself with all these things, so let's say, for example, that your first one is food, and let's say that you find yourself eating and it's when you are feeling emotionally disconnected from people and like seeking comfort and security. You might do things like meditate for some form of comfort or security, or you might do things like actually connect with people, call a friend, or do things that are actually getting you to the source of connection. The more we can take our needs and go directly to the source, the more aligned and the more fulfilled we also feel, because our needs are kind of like buckets. So let's pretend that I have a really high need for emotional connection, which I do, and let's say that I feel unsafe around people, let's pretend, and that I don't think I can make new friends or connect with individuals. Well, let's say my brain goes, okay, you know what? A better way of getting emotional connection is through reality TV show and characters and connecting to people's stories. You can think of like this bucket, and you can think of that strategy to meet your needs for emotional connection as being like a faucet that's just dripping really slowly. And it's going to require a lot of time and a lot of drops to fill that bucket, because I'm going so indirectly to a way to get the need. The television show is such an indirect way of getting emotionally connected. But let's say instead that I decide to actually go and spend time with people, even if it's a little outside of my comfort zone, because I have some limiting beliefs. Let's say I take action and I decide that, you know what, this is a strong need for me. I'm going to build up to it, and I'm going to start meeting with people directly and making new friends directly. That's like taking the tap and opening the faucet so all the water can pour out, and the need, that bucket can get really filled up effectively. And here's what happens as a result. You're most conscious and you're most aware, and you're the highest expression of yourself when your needs are most fulfilled. So you want to take inventory of those needs, those 6 basic human needs, check your strategies to get those needs met as well, and come up with the healthiest, most effective strategies that you can to get them met. And what you'll see literally as a byproduct of this is that you have more inspiration, more energy, you feel more in alignment, more excitement, and you'll naturally just be a more productive version of yourself when your needs are being met in the healthiest forms possible. So just to recap, when you find that you're taking negative action, or you're, doing things that you don't like that you do at a conscious level, you're judging your subconscious mind, I want you to first make yourself very aware of what the actions are. So what specific behavioral coping mechanisms do you have at the action level, the A part of that, the BT equation. And I want you to ask yourself, what needs am I trying to get met through this behavior? What are healthier ways of getting this need met specifically? And then if you want, just as the last step, you can also ask yourself, what are the costs, what are the negative parts of meeting my need through this unconscious coping mechanism? And what you're going to do is elicit negative emotional associations in response to the thing that you don't like. So for example, if it's getting your emotional connection needs met through watching reality television, okay, what are the downsides of that? What does that cost me? Oh, well, I never actually make real friends. I feel like I'm stale and tired after watching so much television. I become less productive. I feel depressed because I'm not actually getting to connect with other people. So show yourself, make conscious what the cost is so you know. And what that does is it elicits negative emotional responses in response to something that your subconscious is holding as a positive emotional program. So you'll start to equilibrate the associations there and neutralize some of that programming. And then you can turn around and go, and what are the positives of going and getting this need met in a healthier, updated strategy that I've written down? So let's say calling a friend, or going to a networking event, or going to a meetup and meeting new people. What are the positive outputs of that? Oh, I can build new relationships. I can learn things from other people. I can maybe develop a romantic relationship if I find somebody there. And what you're doing is you're neutralizing the old program through building negative associations to it, and you're emphasizing a new program using that repetition plus emotion piece. So you're showing your mind that, hey, this is much more effective and it feels better, which means you're more likely to keep creating that, or firing and wiring that neural circuitry that's leading towards a positive and desired outcome, instead of getting stuck on something that's just an old, outdated strategy and that's appearing as a self-sabotage action or behavior in your life that you are trying to let go of. So in this next module, we're going to go through all the different types of reprogramming in a little bit more detail. So what you can take in is everything that you've learned thus far in the course. Your negative belief patterns, any patterns of thought that you find that you're holding, emotional patterns, or unconscious coping mechanisms taking place in the form of actions. And you can insert these into these different programming tools that you'll be learning. So exercise 7, this is all about action reprogramming and our personal needs. So for the chart below, you'll see underneath this rating here, the idea is to write the autopilot coping mechanisms you often use when your emotional state is not optimized. We're going to look at what subconscious needs are being met through these actions, and then we're going to update them. And as we stick to this repeated update of new actions for 21 days, we can reprogram our autopilot coping mechanisms and actions or behaviors. So we're going to start, and I'm going to explain this to you, okay? We're going to start here by just ranking our 6 basic human needs from 1 to 10, just so we can see just some insight into some of our needs. What's most important to us? Maybe we say, okay, certainty is a 6 for me. Uncertainty, okay, maybe I like novelty and new things, and I'm interested in new adventures and opportunities. Maybe I say, you know what, 7.5. Significance, maybe I say, you know what, I don't tend to seek out significance too much, but I always appreciate feeling, you know, that there's meaning and a sense of purpose in life. Great. So maybe we'll say a 4. Love and connection, maybe we say, you know what, it's an 8. And maybe a lot of your life is run by growth, and growth is really important. And maybe so is contribution, and you see yourself sort of showing up like this. And you don't have to pick perfect numbers. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just about you tuning into like what you tend to prioritize, what tends to be most important to you. You know, if you had to delete one at a time that you had to live without, what would be left standing? Those are going to be your most important ones. So just a general idea, just a little bit of reflection. And then this brings us to here. And the idea here is about understanding the needs that our unhealthy patterns or coping mechanisms meet, so then we can update our strategies. Okay, we can get these needs met in healthier forms. So you may say, you know, in this example, we have binge watching TV, and we see, and I'm sort of repeating this example, but I just want you to see it. Well, what needs does that meet? Oh, well, when I watch TV, I feel sort of zoned out, so I get some comfort needs met. I sort of curl up into a ball on my couch and just, you know, feel comfortable. Emotional connection, because maybe I watch shows where I feel emotionally connected to the characters. I can't tell you how often I've seen this. And then let's say escape from my negative or harsh thoughts about myself. So you get peace of mind, right? So you're just identifying the needs there and that stuff. You can see the example here, but I want to do it with you. And then, okay, how can I upgrade my strategies to create updated strategies to get these needs met? So maybe I say, okay, how can I get more comfort? Well, comfort, I can do lots of things. I can make my home cozier. I can light candles. I can wear comfortable clothes more often. I can set better boundaries in life regarding things that make me uncomfortable. I can question my painful stories that make me feel bad about myself and thus uncomfortable, right? And so you can keep coming up with strategies, but you just pick like 1 or 2 that you can really action. And you're basically going to rinse and repeat this for all of the different strategies you have. So then you say emotional connection. Maybe you say, I can be more vulnerable in my friendships. I can open up more, so I feel more seen, heard, connected. You could do the same thing with family. You could emotionally connect to yourself more through journaling, through meditation, right? Then we can go into escape from harsh thinking or peace of mind. And meditation is a great thing for that again. Maybe you say witnessing your thoughts and not investing in the painful narratives too much. A really great way is thought reprogramming, the best way. Or belief reprogramming. So you're just going to keep going through and putting in like these different strategies, and then you can pick 1 or 2 that are actionable for you, and that is what you're going to work on. And as you repeat this for 21 days, you have these new ways of getting your needs met. This painful coping mechanism, whether it's drinking too much alcohol, whether it's getting too angry and expressing anger in an angry way, you know, whatever it might be, your goal here is to be able to update your strategies of getting your needs met. And what happens is this symptom, this unhealthy pattern will fall away, because the symptom is only there to meet these underlying needs. When you have better ways of getting the needs met, there's no longer a need for this, okay? And not that binge watching TV is the worst thing ever, but that can be really unproductive and stop us from truly getting our needs actioned and met when it's taking place in like a binge format. Same with anything else. So the more we create updated strategies to meet the underlying needs, we deal with the root of the problem, and the surface symptom gets to fall away. Welcome to part 2 of Module 5. In this module, we're going to go through all the different forms of reprogramming. And so what you're going to be able to do is take all the patterns you've noticed so far, any limiting beliefs from your belief sweep and inventory at the beginning of this course, any beliefs that come from anywhere else that you're noticing, negativity, your core beliefs, things like I am unsafe, I am powerless, I am not good enough. And you're going to be able to insert your beliefs, any negative patterns of thought, or any unconscious coping mechanisms that you don't like that you take part in, the action pieces of the BTEA equation, and you're going to be able to insert them into these different reprogramming tools so that you can create results at any one of those core levels. So, one piece of reprogramming you've touched on so far is at the belief level, the belief equilibration tool, which was the ability to recognize a core belief, and then take that core belief and find proof that opposes that core belief. Remember, the proof elicits that emotional response. So by questioning the core belief and then finding proof that contradicts that core belief, you're going to be able to equilibrate the stored emotional associations that create that belief program in the first place. Now we're going to go into a whole bunch of other things. We've touched on the thought reprogramming tool, which is the ability to take your thoughts and when you're triggered in real time, navigate your emotional responses by going inward and repatterning or changing the thinking processes that you're experiencing to create desired results. And again, that repetition over time that elicits the emotional response is what will really wire that programming in. One thing you want to note before we go into the next pieces of reprogramming here in this module is that some of these things take time. Because the subconscious is programmed through repetition plus emotion, you're really looking for the time for a new neural network to enforce itself, so fire and wire and strengthen itself, and the old neural network or the old patterning that you've been running to atrophy and sort of die off over time. It's not just like a delete and put a new program in kind of experience. There is a bit of a time period that must take place so that that repetition plus emotion can really, really reinforce itself over time. So here's what we're going to go into next. This is one of my favorite tools because it's very effective. And this is called ritual reprogramming. So when you wake up, in the first hour that you're awake or the last hour before you go to bed, your brain is producing mostly alpha and theta brainwaves. And alpha and theta brainwaves are the same brainwaves you need to be hypnotized. They're the brainwaves that make you very suggestible. So basically, during this time period, your conscious mind can sort of permeate, can sort of penetrate your subconscious programming much more effectively. You're almost like in your own very light state of hypnosis during this time. Now keep in mind, this is as long as you're not doing things like getting up in the morning and having a cup of coffee right away. This is if you have that first hour to not be rushing and to not drink any coffee or have any substance too early in the day that's going to impact your emotional state. And so during this period, one of the most effective things you can do is take your core beliefs from that core beliefs chart. So that chart you have on page 5 of your workbook that has the I am unsafe, I am not good enough, I am unlovable, all those inferences about yourself, those I am beliefs that are causing and sort of wreaking the most havoc on your life, what you want to do is pluck out 1 or 2 major ones. And in this first hour or last hour before you go to bed, when you are very suggestible to yourself, you want to use repetition plus emotion to find 10 to 15 pieces of evidence for why the opposite is true. So for example, if you're working on I am unlovable or I am unloved, you want to look for 10 to 15 pieces of evidence for how you are lovable or you are loved. And you want to look in the 7 areas of life. So if you look in your workbook itself, I have all these cues and steps set up to help reinforce this belief. So under auto-suggestion, ritual reprogramming, you'll see that you have your 7 areas of life, and you want to look for in each of these 7 areas where the opposite of this belief is true. So look for it with friendships, where are you lovable? With family relationships, where are you lovable? Where are you loved? Romantic relationships, where are you lovable or loved? And you can look for specific people. You can look for the who makes you feel lovable or loved, or you can look for the what, the which qualities are making you worthy of love or lovable. And so, it's not going to be too difficult to come up with 10 to 15 pieces when you're doing the who and the what in all of the 7 areas of life. Now, You can also apply this, and it's even more effective when you use something called autosuggestion. Now, autosuggestion is essentially being in a very relaxed or trance-like state. So using something like meditation or breathing techniques to get yourself into a very relaxed state, and then apply these rituals for reprogramming. And again, remember what we talked about, where your subconscious mind stores every memory, and every memory is colored with all of the emotion intact. And so by picking up specific pieces of evidence from your life that contradict that original negative program, that is what you need in order to do the reprogramming itself. So you want to find, if your thing is I am unlovable, 10 to 15 reasons. Go through all the 7 areas of life, go through the what, go through the who, 10 to 15 reasons that you are lovable or worthy of love. And again, if you can do something before that puts you in a very relaxed or trance-like state of meditation, breathing work, or any kind of even guided meditation, or just use that window right as you're waking up or soon before you're going to bed where you're in that more relaxed state, this is the most effective time to apply your autosuggestion reprogramming rituals. So that's one really effective piece of reprogramming. Another one that you can do is something called exposure response. This is a really exciting one at the A level, at the action level of that BTEA equation. So what exposure response is it's a way of exposing yourself to something that your brain is sort of keeping you locked in a prison around. So let's say, for example, that you have a terror, you're super terrified of spiders. And let's say that you want to use exposure response to break down that fear of spiders. The idea of exposure response is that you will incrementally, slowly over time, expose yourself to the thing that you're afraid of, and then intentionally create healthier emotional responses in relation to that exposure. So, as an example, you might, put a spider in a jar and walk into a room that has a spider in a jar in it the first day. And let's say you're really, really afraid and you feel all this panic. What you're going to try to do is use your conscious mind to tell your subconscious mind and let it know, hey, you're safe, everything's okay, nothing bad is happening right now. The spider's in the jar, you're protected, and you want to give yourself suggestions as you're action-wise exposing yourself to the thing that you're afraid of to, again, equilibrate, build new subconscious associations to old programming that exists. So day 1, you might walk into the room. Day 2, when you start to become more comfortable, you might go up to the jar that has the spider in it. And again, make new associations emotionally to the experience. Okay, you know what? I'm near it. It's not that bad. I still feel pretty normal. Nothing bad's happening to me. I'm in a safe environment, and try to associate calming and relaxing and relieving emotions to the experience. And over time, you might build up to the point where you take the jar off and the spider's there and you're in the open, and you might see that, hey, in fact, it's completely okay and I'm completely safe. And by exposing yourself incrementally over time and eliciting new emotional associations consciously and intentionally in relationship to the thing that you're afraid of or limited around or by, what you're doing very effectively is programming in new associations. It's a really effective tool for reprogramming. And the last thing that you can do, which I absolutely love, and it's a really effective one, is you can do something called your vision of future. And so again, because your mind is so deeply programmed through repetition plus emotion, you can do something where you go through the 7 areas of life. This is very future oriented, and you can write out goals or a vision or a dream you have in all the 7 areas of life. And the idea for this is you want to make this as vivid as possible. You want to bring in details, and you want to bring in smells and sounds. Like if you're envisioning your life 3 years from now, 5 years from now, what does it look like? Where are you living? What does the weather feel like in that area? What is your home looking like? What are the people that you're around? How do they make you feel? You want to bring in as many senses to this vision as possible. And again, you want to go through all 7 areas of life that you have on the first page of your workbook. And you want to make this clear and vivid and write it all out with as many details as possible, and then record it. So read it back to yourself, record it on your phone, or if you have some kind of recording device on your computer or somewhere in your home. And then again, because you're super suggestible in those windows, when you wake up or before you go to bed, it can be really effective to listen to yourself reading this. And instead of having to put your energy and intention towards reading, you're just listening more passively, but it allows you to better put your energy towards visualizing all of the experience itself. And the more emotion you can lace into this, the more you can feel about the vision, the more effective this will become at programming your subconscious to make this into a reality. And remember earlier we were talking about that study with the people with their working at their biceps. Your brain can't really tell the difference between what's real and what's imagined or visualized. So these are very effective techniques to help you start teaching your brain that it's possible, that you're capable, that you're able to achieve these things that you've set out in this vision of your life. So just in review, these three major exercises that we can use are the autosuggestion ritual reprogramming exercise, the exposure response exercise, and the vision of your future exercise. And these go hand in hand with some of the tools we talked about earlier. The belief repatterning, by questioning a belief when it's activated, finding proof of the opposite, and the thought repatterning, which is when you are emotionally triggered or activated, to literally go inwards instead of outwards and become reactive and reflect and update your thinking so that constantly, repetitively, you are eliciting an emotional response that's lighter, that's healthier, that's more productive, and that you're not just more deeply wiring old programs that you don't want to exist. And the last reprogramming tool we discussed was it was at the action level. If you have a pattern of behavior or a self-sabotage pattern that you don't like that you're doing, understand what needs you are getting met through it, update to healthier forms or strategies to get these needs met, build positive emotional associations into getting these new needs met. What are the upsides of meeting my needs in this healthier way? And what are the downsides of meeting my needs in this self-sabotage form, so that you're balancing your associations, creating negative to balance out the stored positive for a strategy that's no longer serving you, and creating positive to see that the healthier forms and versions of getting this need met are more effective. Again, these are all outlined in your workbook, so choose the ones that you're most inspired to do first. Play with all of them, test them out, and then commit to something if you can for 21 full days. Research shows it takes about 21 days to create a new habit. However, if we lace in the emotional components and we use these reprogramming tools, they are much more effective because, remember, you can speed up the process because emotion is louder and has more of an impact on the subconscious mind than just the language or the repetition. So using these things together will help you to see results that much more quickly. But still, I think it's a great idea if you're really dedicated, really committed to your work, see these things through, especially around really painful limiting beliefs that you might have been carrying, because you're sort of like plucking the weed up from the very, very root. I hope you've gotten so much out of this course so far. Thank you so much for sticking through all these modules with me and for being a part of this journey. I'm really excited to hear about your transformation in the forum and in the group. So in exercise 8 here, we have belief reprogramming rituals with autosuggestion. The purpose of this exercise is to be able to target your beliefs at the absolute root level. Our painful perceptions that we have stored as beliefs about ourselves, and even others, can be very disempowering and direct our lives without us realizing. This exercise will teach you how to isolate and deeply reprogram the root causes of what impacts your internal dialogue, emotions, and even behaviors, if you think of your BTEAs. So what we're going to start by doing here is just find that core belief. And earlier in some of the exercises, you were taught how to target that core belief. And then what we're going to do is we are going to find 10 to 15 pieces of evidence every single day to oppose that core belief. So for example, if it's I'm not good enough, it's I am good enough. And you're picking 10 to 15 pieces of evidence for why. If it's I'm unlovable, why you are lovable. Remember, evidence is the language of the subconscious mind in a way, because the actual languages are imagery and emotion. And when you pick a piece of evidence, so you say I'm good enough because I X, Y, and Z. When you think of whatever X, Y, and Z is for you, it's a memory. And when you think of that memory, even if it's a recent memory from 5 minutes ago, you think of that memory and an image comes to your mind, and all memory is colored with emotion. So you get imagery and emotion when you pick out pieces of evidence. So we pick 10 to 15, and then we're actually using our conscious mind to speak in the language of the subconscious and to help release that wound and equilibrate it where it actually exists, right? The conscious mind working at the conscious level just through thinking or affirmations doesn't really reach the deep roots that we're trying to work on. So you'll see in this part of the exercise, you have tons of prompters, okay? Each of these prompters here is designed to help you target each of the 7 areas of life. And if you come up with 2, for example, pieces of evidence in each area of life, you already have 14. And if you're going for 10 to 15, you're above and beyond, right? So let's look here. Let's just use a simple example that you're working on the core wound. I'm not good enough, okay? So you would say, I am good enough, or I am doing enough, depending on what your belief is specifically looking like. So here, you're going to look in your career. So I'm good enough. And remember, it doesn't matter how big or small the evidence is. It matters that you start firing and wiring little neural pathways, little neural patterns. Over time, these things will strengthen. You'll feel better. Your actions will be better. Your behaviors will be in alignment with these beliefs, and you'll see more, large pieces of evidence long term. It is completely okay to pick little tiny things to begin with. That's where I started personally. That's where most people start. There's nothing wrong with that, okay? So let's just say in the career area of my life, I showed up to work on time. I made a good comment in the meeting, okay? Just 2 little things about how you were good enough, what you did that was good enough, okay? Let's pick the next one. I made a good financial decision to not impulse buy the expensive item online. I checked in with my budget. Okay, so you're just looking 10 to 15, emotional area of life. I learned something about my needs today. I recognized when I needed to set a boundary and chose to do so. And maybe you have an extra one in here because you're doing this work. Maybe you're like, I showed up to do 30 minutes. Even if you do 10 minutes a day, you're killing it. Of PDF work. Okay, maybe you say, I questioned a story today and didn't invest in an old, painful narrative about myself being unlovable. Okay, so you're going to go through here and you're going to pick, spiritual is an area of life. If you don't have a specific spiritual practice or spiritual beliefs, it's great to just say things like, be under the category of things like I was forgiving, I was compassionate, I was kind, I was honest. They can be things about your morals and values. Physical obviously can be health or fitness. It can be your physical appearance too, and it can be your body. Those different things. But I find health and fitness to be great areas to focus on. Mental is all about learning, relationships. You can break this down. You can have friends, family, and romantic as separate categories. And what you'll see, we already have 2, 4, 6, 8. So you're already more than halfway. If you just put 1 or 2 for the rest, it's easy, right? You've got your reprogramming done for the day. And the more you can feel about these things, as long as you go through this for 21 days, you are going to crush it. You're going to see these beliefs really releasing. You're going to feel like, oh my goodness, this isn't a part of my identity anymore. And it's really, really powerful, the impact that has. So in exercise 9 here, it's all about exposure response reprogramming. So what we're going to start by doing is just referring to the 7 areas of life. And you can just pick one challenge or fear you'd like to overcome. And we're going to start with 1, and then you can obviously go through each area. And what you're essentially doing, as we talk about in the course, is you're picking small incremental steps you can take towards exposing yourself to that fear. And then what you're doing is you're going to think conscious thoughts to create new emotional feelings. So for example, let's say I'm afraid to speak up in a meeting. I may do that, raise my hand, and then my subconscious autopilot thoughts want to say, oh, everybody's judging you. What if you said the wrong thing? Instead, I'm going to create conscious thoughts to say, that was courageous. I did this. I proved to myself I could do this. This was a good idea. People were receptive to that. I'm being heard. This is me respecting myself and honoring myself. So I'm going to intentionally think thoughts that create a better feeling. So now my subconscious mind starts lacing new positive emotions to these actions that I'm taking to move in a different direction. So this is essentially this, and we're going to go through each of these major areas here in this chart. And in this area, you're going to put your incremental steps, or the challenge you want to come, and then your incremental steps here. So let's just use that simple example. I want to feel comfortable public speaking in meetings, presentations, etc. Okay? Steps to achieve it. So you may say, I will begin by sharing one small thing in a small meeting with 3 people. And then you can put in brackets here. I will think about how I am courageous and deserving of having my opinions heard. Okay? Step 2. I will next share my opinions or feedback in a meeting with 5 or more people. I will then think about how my opinion is well informed and I am a hard worker. I will also think about how I am seeing my growth in this area. Okay? Step 3. So then you keep going, but then step 3 can become that you speak to, a boardroom full of people. Step 4 could be that you are going to speak in a presentation in front of, 50 people in your office. Step 5, maybe you join Toastmasters and you're speaking in front of people there. Like, you keep going, but you set incremental steps that aren't so scary when you start. So they're just these little tiny stretches where when you think positive thoughts that are working on your behalf, that are conscious and that you're creating instead of just these autopilot thoughts that will come up to try to scare you from past programs, it feels like it can resonate. And so you do this over time, and it's extremely great breakthrough work for reprogramming. And you're basically just going to pick in these different areas of life different versions of that you want to brainstorm and show up to do. It's amazing work. It really helps you move through things very, very quickly, and you can really see the growth happening in real time. So for exercise 10 here, we have vision of the future reprogramming. So this exercise is all about creating what you want your future to look like on one page. And we're going to look at all the 7 areas of life, and you're ideally also going to engage the opposition towards your subconscious beliefs that are limiting you. So for example, let's say you're working on the core belief, I am disliked. In the vision of your future, you're going to say, I get along so well with my coworkers. I am liked and respected by people in the office. The people that I rope up with to do financial planning or to talk about budgeting, I get along with. I have great relationships with. Mentally, I have a community of like-minded learners who I get along with and I respect. So you're going to, in each area, make sure you try to touch on 1 or 2 major core wounds and you oppose them. And in the entire vision, you really want to engage all of your 5 senses as much as possible. This creates more imagery and sensation, which is, easily read and digested and understood by your subconscious mind. As much emotion as possible, so talking about your feelings. And then the more pictures, the more pieces of evidence, the more vivid you can make the whole thing, the better. And then what you're going to do is when you've written it in the space below here, you're going to go back through and you are going to listen to it, read it into a recording device, so like your phone, and then you're going to listen back to it, and as you listen to it, you're going to try to feel and visualize about it. Every time I do this in my life skyrockets forward. Things take place so quickly. Great things happen so quickly. I've worked with hundreds of clients over the years, probably thousands, honestly, and when they do this work, their life starts to shift really, really quickly as well. This has been a really popular tool at PDF. Many people have used it. Lots of dramatic changes have happened for people so quickly, but it's because we really engage our subconscious mind in our transformation in a very quick way. So this is just an empty space for you to do this. How I advise doing this is setting up the different areas of your life in advance. You could set some like general goals or intentions, things you want to see. And you could write some jot notes here. So maybe you say, I want to buy a house. I want to, whatever it might be, have a community that I'm a part of. Whatever it might be, you put these things out, and then you can go through and say, career, financial. And what you would do here is set up what you want this area to look like. How do you feel when you wake up going to your career? How do you feel in the workplace? What does your office area look like? What do your relationships with your coworkers feel like? And again, add in a lot of the opposition to your core wounds and write like 3, 4, maybe 5 sentences for each one to describe this, to encompass it. Again, the more emotion, the more imagery, the better. Adding in the opposition of those core wounds. And then at the end, you can just kind of read them all together, the 3 or 4 sentences you put for each area of life, and that's what you're recording into your phone. That's what you're listening back to. And this is a very powerful tool for rapid transformation. So I hope you enjoy. Thank you so much for being here. I really hope to see you in the webinars and our different community events. I appreciate you and looking forward to hearing your questions in those live events.